Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. And this week we're discussing building a business strategy to increase your number of clients and candidates. Now, as usual, I start to look at stats and I realize that when we talk about customers and their experiences, the customers for recruitment agencies are all clients and candidates. So when reviewing the stats below, I think you want to use the word companies or things along the lines with companies, brand, etc. Think about your clients and your candidates when we talk about this. So companies that lead in customer experience outperform laggards, great word, by nearly 80%. Brands that are superior customer experience bringing 5.7 times more revenue than competitors that lag in customer experience. Companies that engage in employee outperform or engage in employee performance outperform the competitors by 147%. And 80% of value creation achieved by successful growth companies come from their core business, namely business generated from their existing customers. So think existing customers, not only your clients, but also your candidates that are sat done on your CRM. And here's some sort of stats that came out of several reviews. So an interesting stat, 65% of outside executives, they're people who visit their clients, attain a quota, which is 10% higher than people that just sit on the phone. Prospects are open to communicating with sellers at industry events, 34%, via LinkedIn, 21%, via text, 1%, voicemail, 21%, and social media, only 18%. 50% of buyers like to speak over the phone compared to 70% of reps, and the percentage increase is higher the further up the ladder you get. So you've got more chance of getting a VP or a C-suite person on the phone. In 2007, it took 3.6 cold calls to reach a prospect. Nowadays, it takes 8, and on average, it takes 18 calls to actually connect with the buyer. Salespeople who actively seek out and exploit referrals earn 4 to 5 times more that don't, and 91% of customers say they'd give a referral. Only 11% of salespeople ask for them. And 44% of sales reps give up after the first call. So we've got to think in this sort of omni-channel customer service world that we live in. If you want to differentiate, we've got to think in the 90s where you only had the phone or the fax. Today, customers are active on dozens of platforms and they see your brand where they can engage with you, praise you, criticize you, and without you even knowing it, they can leave you. So we've got to start to think to build your business strategy and increase your numbers and clients and candidates. How do we do that? So today I'm joined by Paul, Dave, and Martin. Today it's Heather's mum's birthday, so we wish her happy birthday. They're out celebrating. And what we'll sort of do is kick in with the first question. The first question then is, what daily habits can recruitment leaders adapt to consistently drive development success?
Okay, I suppose I'll kick this off. Martin, I can see is straining at the leash to get in here, so I'll pass it in a moment.
Just to say, Paul, you weren't on last week, and we waited about 5 minutes without asking.
It was dull without me. Let's be completely honest.
We didn't know what to say. We were kind of stunned.
I know it's not the same without Paul, is it? Let's be honest. So look, I mean, I think this point about daily habits is an interesting statement because us chaps, as it were, on this call, know that very often when we speak to organizations, business development tends to be an ad hoc subject. It's something that kind of arises when business suddenly slips away or we have a quiet period and then there's sudden activity around, right, we've got to get new business in, we need to find new clients, we need to get new jobs and so forth. Whereas it needs to be, and you've said it well, Howard, it needs to be a daily habit. We need to be consistently looking on a daily basis for new business opportunities. And I also hear, and I'm sure you guys do too, when it's really busy, we don't need new business because actually we've got more than we can cope with at the moment, which is also a very bad thing to be saying because there is never enough new business. And frankly, the moment you stop looking for new business, it tends to bite you somewhere tender about 12, 13 weeks later. So this point about daily habits is a really, really good statement. It needs to be embedded in the organization. And I think when we're looking at what habits can you actually bring into play, this comes down to, in my mind, and I think you guys will no doubt have more to say about it, but I think It has to be the daily activities, and those activities also relate to daily meetings with the people in the organization. So the morning stand-ups, the lunchtime catch-ups, the end of day mop-ups that we have relative to the roles we have, or the activities, that we are dealing with on a daily basis. But embedded in that is our conversations consistently about the organizations we're talking to, those that we should be talking to, and so forth. And I think the last point I'd make is that I think that you have to make sure that your CRM is absolutely used correctly, so that you are consistently, you and your people consistently making notes about organizations you're speaking to or want to speak to, and these reminders are consistently coming at you on a daily basis. Call this one, speak to that organization, and so forth. It has to be done in a very disciplined fashion. You don't just every now and then say, right, we're going to business development. It needs to be done on a daily basis, looking for leads daily, making sure things are documented properly, and driven by the owners of the business.
Yeah,
There you go.
I will jump in now, Paul. So
Yeah,
thanks.
I'll shut up now.
I think that kind of that rigor and that habit is absolutely true. But I'd also pick up on a point that Howard made at the top, that it's now 8 calls to a prospect to make an impact. And if you are having the same conversation 8 times, you're even less likely to actually make an impact as well. So I would say one of the habits I would build into your day is to learn something new. Read something, look at a blog, talk to peers, have something that excites you. So when you talk to prospects, you've got something new and interesting to tell them. You need to go on these phone calls with them, with adding value to their day in a way above and beyond just transactional recruitment. Tell them something about the marketplace. And that also goes for your dormant customers, candidates, your existing clients. Spread that word, have that kind of interest, and become that focal point that they look to for market intelligence. So add something above and beyond the kind of the daily grind that you can give you.
Yeah, great point.
I think to add to both of what you're saying, we sometimes assume that business development is the role of the person who has the title business development manager. Yeah, where actually there's a lot of business development to be done in accounts that we've been trading with for years, that we may assume we know everything there is to know. So, Paul, you made the point about having the check-ins at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, and sometimes people do it at lunchtime. Sometimes companies don't do that at all.
Yeah.
They wait till the end of the week, and then they're discussing what's happened during the week. Whereas I would always say a daily check-in, beginning and the end of the day, is good. And they should be focusing, from a habit point of view, on new prospects, as in people we haven't done business before, existing prospects, existing customers, and then ongoing live requirements. And if you have a habit of discussing those 3 things every day at the beginning of the day and every day at the end of the day, it kind of forces people, even if they're just, and I say just, but we know how important account managers are, but even if they're account managers who don't have business development in their title, they can still be talking about what's new, what's going on at that client.
I think it's a really interesting question. And
It
I
would
think
be.
that,
You raised it, mate, so it has to be interesting.
well, I raised it and wrote it. So, of course, it's interesting.
So, of course, it's interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to find one that means that you have to take a breath somewhere when you speak, Paul, but I'm not going to find that at all.
Wait, don't start.
So I think to me that what I was thinking about was it's about creating discipline. And I think this is where a lot of recruitment agencies and agents sort of have problems with creating discipline. And it's too easy to do something that is easy to do than do something that's difficult to do. And so I remember when I sort of started to sort of really sort of work out how to bill more, and it was more of a selfish thing because I wanted to do certain things outside of work, and therefore I had to make sure inside of work I was consistent in what I was doing. So I built discipline. What I built was that every morning for an hour I would do requirement management, look at my requirements, make sure that I had the right number of CVs. I'd talk to the clients, book the interviews in, etc. If it didn't take an hour, that was great, but that was that first hour that booked out. The next hour was all about candidate generation to the jobs that I had on. And I really worked at building that candidate generation. And then the final hour of the morning was all about business development, not new business development, business development. It was about developing the business that I had, developing the clients that had bought from me and had bought from me recently, those that had lapsed, develop those. Then spent 2 hours over lunch doing whatever I wanted to do over lunch, catch up on everything. But then I repeated those 3 sessions again in the afternoon, constantly. So I was constantly doing those. And what I didn't allow was one session to leak into another. So if a brand new job came in and I was doing business development, then I'd carry on doing my business development. Now, people used to say to me, but sure, you're going to get behind the marketplace. But the question is, if I've got my systems worked out correctly, which is what you were talking about, Paul, about having your CMs correctly, etc., you will know who's available. You know when it's available, know what's going on when it's available. But I made sure that every day I did 2 hours every day of business development and made sure that it was consistent over and over again. And therefore, I never had a problem with clients. I always had lots of clients giving me lots of jobs, but I also had lots of candidates that could fill those jobs because I was doing candidate generation all the time. So it is to me about forming a habit and forming the discipline of that habit. And I think discipline goes, in a very, very consistent way if you get it right, rather than getting motivation, which is a spike and then drops. So second question then, how can you ensure that your team prioritize candidate sourcing as a revenue generating activity? And let's put this outside of working on jobs.
Yeah, and I think that this is a great question. I was thinking back about this and remembering my very early years, which of course was when gas lamps were around and horse-drawn carriages. And I remember whenever I had a new consultant join my Alfred Marks branch in High Holborn, the first thing I got them to do for several weeks was just speak to candidates. I didn't want them speaking to employers. I didn't want them to work jobs. I wanted them to speak to candidates. I knew even then that the candidates were enormous lead generators. Number one, you gain a tremendous amount of information about their employers through candidates if you obviously are capable of asking the right questions, the usual standard how, what, which, why, where, when questions. It's a tremendous method of gaining information about what's going on within the organization. Gives you info about whether they're using recruitment businesses, whether they are using temporary or contractor staff, whether there are vacancies available, whether people are happy, what's going on in the organization, are they doing well, are they struggling, and so on and so on. It's a phenomenal method of gaining market intelligence. And thinking back again to my early years, we used to have our temporary staff come in on a Friday in those days to pick up their salaries and give timesheets. But one of the major reasons we spent time giving them lunch, for example, on a Friday, was to ask them what was going on in the organizations we'd sent them to. Candidates are the most effective method of gaining market information. You mentioned earlier correctly, Martin, that being aware of market intelligence and talking to clients about information that's relevant to their industry sector or their organization is very important, and I couldn't agree more. A lot of that information comes directly from the candidates. The other thing I think about this point is that we should be consistently, I think we'll come into this a bit later, but we should be consistently speaking to, again, looking for reasons to do this, candidates that we have put on our system, keeping them close to us, keeping them engaged with our organization. There are methods of doing that, not just verbally, but other methods of contacting, connecting with people, so that we're aware of their thoughts when they're looking to change jobs. Not assuming they're going to come to us when they're ready, but making certain that they come to us when they're good and ready. And again, this comes back to the point we made earlier about being very disciplined about this. And again, making sure that when you're contacting candidates, it's because you've reminded yourself to do it. You've put it on the system and it's coming back at you on a daily basis. Call this one, call that one, speak to this one, speak to that one. It's not done because you suddenly remember light bulb moment at 3 a.m. that you should speak to Joe Bloggs. So for me, in talking to candidates should be an essential activity every single day, and you need time to block out for it, so that it isn't a once in a blue moon activity. It's very consistently done, as with the conversation we had earlier about business development, speaking to clients.
Yeah, it brings a point up actually, Paul. I was talking to a customer this week who, very experienced recruiter, many years in recruitment, struggling to generate sales at the moment, as a lot of people are. And he'd fallen into the trap where he was considering customers and clients and prospects and candidates as two completely separate spheres.
Yeah.
And we had a whole session breaking that down to say your candidates are your eyes and ears on site. They are the voice. But also, if anyone in your business gets a senior role in, use that as the opportunity to phone prospects as candidates, talk to them about their ambitions and their careers, and all of a sudden the dynamic of the call changes. You're offering them something other than trying to get something from them. So just having that mindset that candidates and customers operate in the same sphere, they sit on the same sites next to each other, they stand at the water cooler, and change your mindset around candidates being a source of revenue generation, I think is really key.
Both those points. A slightly different take on the question, Howard. I believe passionately that candidate sourcing is a skill. And I still talk to recruiters, in recruitment businesses, who say we're going to bring them in as a resource, and if they do very well, we're going to make them into salespeople.
Mm.
And you know what, candidates, we've discussed about demographics, how the fact in the UK, for example, there's significantly fewer people now working and therefore available than there were 20 years ago. So candidates become a prize asset. Therefore, people that speak to candidates in your organisation should be treated with golden gloves. They should be trained. They should know how to have those conversations, how to develop those relationships, and don't assume that if that's good, then they go off and be salespeople because that makes them better or makes them different. Because actually, we need those skills for candidate sourcing. Because what we know from Gabby Preston-Pfeiffer, for example, who's been on here from Tooled Up Recruitment, how many people on LinkedIn, for example, deliberately spell something wrong so they can't be found by agencies, but they're there. They'll spell engineer with one E rather than two. And I forget the exact figures, but I think it was 11% or something like that. If you've got a talented talent sourcer, candidate sourcer, you should regard them with pride and develop and build that as a career.
So I think that we overplay a certain part of our business. We overplay the power of our CRM and the candidates that are on our CRM. And I've been working with a number of temp agencies recently, and the simple question has been, how many temps on your CRM are fully compliant and could go out today? And I'm getting, it's 1,000, 2,000, whatever. And how many have you got out? 50, 100. So you've got a very small percentage of the people actually out working that are compliant. And the question then is, why are we not talking to those compliant candidates? And the answer is always, I don't have time. I haven't coded my system properly enough. I don't know what's going on. So if we actually then said, well, how do I get from 5% of our compliant candidates out working to 10% to 15% to 20%? We don't have to put any more money into the pot to actually drag candidates to us because we've got them all. Why aren't we trying to, bring those candidates to us? So as a revenue generating activity, it's actually exploring your candidate database, finding out who is available, whether it be a temp, whether it be a contractor, or whether it be a perm, when they're becoming available, what's going on. And I think we've got to start to think about that more and more. And I go back to, and I keep saying this, I go back from a tech point of view to 97, 98, 99, when the Millennium Bug was coming in. In 97, I was placing temp workers or contract workers, let's say testers, at £300 a day. In 98, I was placing them at $2,500 a day because of the supply and demand. So I knew if I had a candidate, I could take it to market and work it. And that's the same thing about creating daily habits. If a client calls you up and says, I've got a job, if you've got a candidate instantly for them, then that is a massive differentiator than someone out going looking. So I think we are not prioritizing our revenue generation that are sat in our candidate database and work that. And the simple way of looking at it, are we looking at the wrong pipeline? We all talk about our requirement pipeline. Let's say our requirement pipeline is 100K. And I say, right, great. And how many candidates are you going to put to each pipeline? 3. Well, that means your candidate pipeline is 300K. So why aren't we trying to exercise more of that 300K into our profit rather than just looking at the clients that we've got and work from there? So I think we've got to do more with our candidate database and generate more from there. So what practical steps then can recruiters take to transform our sporadic business development efforts into repeatable and a scalable process?
I think the key word there, Howard, is process. Too often we allow our people, in fact, we operate in this way as a business, to go about a business development or any kind of work when we fancy doing it, when we think it's the right thing to do, rather than it being an embedded process. I've got a number of clients actually, that have investors in people to the highest level. And very often IIP talk about embedded processes. So I'll give them a name check. And what they mean by that is that things aren't left to the discretion of people to do certain things, that these things that are important for the business, and let's be honest, business development is certainly up there in the top three, I would have thought, in terms of developing your business, maintaining a robust organization and growing your company. If it's important, it needs to be an embedded process. It needs to be something that is part of the processes that you put into your business, that when people join your organization, they're trained to do. And they are done religiously every single day, every single week. And the processes are mapped out. People are trained to follow a process. The steps of the process are clear. If it's possible to do them through the CRM, so there's a consistent reminder, or it's done through training, or it's done through the direction and control of the senior people, fine, but you follow the steps. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And if you look at the world-class businesses that we all envy and often purchase from, if you take Apple as the perfect example, if you phone up an Apple, what do they call them, Genius, or you go and see one, I can assure you they're following an embedded process. They'll ask you this question, then they ask you this question, then they do this, then they'd ask another question, and it follows, frankly, it follows a script. But it's consistent and it's high level service. Now, I think if you look at how you develop a consistent business development process, whether that's with candidates or with clients, it's done because as a business owner or senior leadership team, you've stepped back and you've said, how do we get consistent activity? What do we do? How do we embed it into our processes? How do we coach and train people? How do we ensure these things are done consistently? That can also lead into your bonus programs, your commission programs, and so forth, and part and parcel of your review processes with your people. So it's not something you do casually. It's something that's absolutely a daily part of your regime.
I think, rightly so, you picked on the first part there, which is that I think there's two reasons that business development becomes sporadic rather than consistent. The first one is the process being in place, and the second one for me is motivation. If one of those drops, then it becomes sporadic. I don't remember which one of you said it to me, but when I joined, one of you said that you'd asked me to join the business to class the joint up a little bit, so I'll try and do that. We've talked about discipline quite a bit, and discipline can be quite an intimidating, scary word with negative connotations, especially when Howard, a black belt and rugby playing person, is talking about discipline as well. But the origin of the word discipline comes from the same root as the word disciple. And when you think about it in those terms, it becomes much more positive about being pulled towards something inspirational, as opposed to, oh Christ, I've got to get on with some new business sales. So now is the perfect time of the year to sit down with yourself and your staff and work out what their goals are for next year. Financially, they want to buy a car, they want to put a deposit on a house, whatever it might be, and then work back using the process to, right, you need to make this many cold calls today.
Yeah.
And get back to that discipline and keep reminding them as to why they're doing it. And that inspiration will add a different slant to the discipline side of the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you're going to get the ancient Greek in, you've upped our game.
I was going to say, I didn't know that was derived from disciple. Did you, Dave?
Oh, no, there you go. I didn't.
There you go.
That's why Martin's here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, adding class, no question.
And actually, I'm going to refer back to something, Martin, you said earlier. It's about also the discipline of what are you going to say to your clients? It's one thing to say, let's do business development and we'll do 2 hours a day regularly, but what are you talking to them about? You know, you can't talk to them. You can talk to them about changes in your business, but they're not that interested. What they are interested, to your point earlier, Martin, is changes in the market. Therefore, our people have to be more educated, or as educated as they can be, about trends, about activities, about data, about information that the clients will like. Because if it's the 8th time they get hold of them, they've got to make that 8th time. a really intelligent business conversation. And we know with the rise of AI and all of the good that that's doing for recruitment, that means the human bit, where we do have those contacts and we do ask for those meetings and we do get together, we've got to have something of worth to talk to. And that's the bit that we should be working with our teams on.
So I think it's about automating and processing what we're talking about, because what we've all talked about there is, if you think about, how you link everything. So let's talk about taking people's names off social media, put them into an email campaign, send them an email campaign, find out who's opened it, find out who clicked it. Then you've got a call strategy. Who you're calling, who are those people who've clicked that? What's your call strategy? What you're talking about? Then you've got a meeting strategy, what you're meeting them about. Then when they give you a job, what's your recruitment strategy to make sure that you satisfy them and things like that. And I think to sort of pull onto Martin's comment about a black belt, the conversation at the black belt session is always about using that discipline to carry on the consistency of your training. And we always say, never worry about a man who knows 10,000 kicks. Worry about the man that knows one kick and practice it 10,000 times. So you start to think about what we're doing. If we don't practice all the things we're trying to get our teams to do, and don't keep training and developing them, then those things fall apart. And I think that's what we fail at mostly in recruitment, is that we don't train people enough to deliver the consistency and the discipline so they become disciples of what we're talking about. And I think that's a very different sort of overlay, rather than saying, right, just let's get on and do a bit of business development. Make sure we train them to develop that and make that training consistent over and over again, because that's when you start to become good. That's when you start to see improvements. That's when you start to see it working, rather than try it once, it doesn't work, etc. What's the stat about, the number of candidates or the number of salespeople that don't follow up after the first call? 44% of reps don't follow up after call number one. Well, there's a simple thing straight away. How about changing that into marketing? How many people never follow up a marketing email, okay, and never call after a marketing email? Same problem, isn't it? So we need to sort of work on that there. So how do you identify and attract then high quality candidates that align with your clients' needs and ensure long-term profitability? And I'm going to jump on Dave first, because Dave said something I think he's going to pull on, okay, early on, and I'll see if he's going to pull it back.
If I don't, Howard, because that was 20 minutes ago, which is a long time.
He's a bit vague these days, a bit doddery and a bit vague. He probably won't remember.
When thinking about this, I'm thinking about how easy do we make it to be in contact with our candidates? How easy is our engagement with our candidates on our website? How often are we sending candidates information about the work that they do, whether they're working for us, whether they're available or not? Are we in contact with the candidates that we know we want to place, which provide them with good work and us with good profit? And how often are we in contact with them? What are we doing with those candidates? So do we know when they finish? Often we used to say, didn't we, that the last CV goes to the existing agent because they want to make sure that the other agents can place them. Well, today on LinkedIn, you can look on LinkedIn Recruiter. How often are we engaging with them? What are we sending them? You go back to the website. Some websites are there as a brochure. Some websites are there to capture candidates to make sure that we can place them. So for me, it's very much about how we engage with those really good candidates. We used to have a thing back in the days when I was JM, was about most placeable candidates. Yeah, everybody had to have 50 most placeable candidates, and they had to know them. And if you had 47 when you came to check, that was a problem. Yeah? You've got to know in your market who are the people that are most placeable. You may have a percentage, How to your point, you may have a percentage of them working, but do you know who the others are, where they are, when they're available?
That's a great point, actually. Most placeable candidates, MPCs. I'm going to just twist this slightly. I think that in order to identify and attract your high quality candidates that align with your clients' needs, I think that is a lot to do with being tight to your clients. So we were talking with a client yesterday about how important I believe it is to have consistent review conversations, business meetings with clients, not necessarily from the perspective of seeing them to ask what vacancies they have at that moment, but much more about that trusted advisor positioning of being tighter to your clients, understanding what's going on within their organizations, the challenges that they have. And this is critical. beginning to anticipate what they might need in the future. Because what tends to happen in our industry, as everybody's aware, is that we work reactively. You know, a call comes in, email comes in from a client, we need this, we need that, or we need a bunch of these guys, and everybody then scurries around desperately trying to find the right candidates to get the CVs and the details across. Whereas if you had consistent contact with the client and you were seeing them, let's say, every quarter for a review, a business review meeting, and they said, look, there's a possibility that we might be looking for one of these or several of these, having that prior notice, being aware of the potential that a client might need a certain type of individual people, gives you the ability to start making contact with those potential candidates in advance of your clients' needs, which of course makes a huge difference, and therefore I think helps you to target certain candidates, certain types of individuals, and speak to them in advance of potential opportunities, line them up, get them ready. And I think this comes back to being very close, very tight, super tight to your clients, making sure that you never go longer than 3 months, 4 months maximum without getting in front of them to understand what's going on. And we live in a world where change is very rapid, very consistent, very constant. If you haven't seen a client for 6 months or longer, you know nothing about what's going on inside their organization. Therefore, you have absolutely no chance of anticipating their needs. So that's where I come from in terms of answering this question.
Yeah. I remember a piece of advice I was given when I first started in recruitment from a mentor that said, finding candidates isn't difficult, moving candidates is difficult. And it might feel counterintuitive today, but I think it's still the case. I think we're never more than 1 or 2 connections away from the candidate who's perfect for the job that we're trying to fill.
Yeah.
If you can't find them on social media or job boards or your database, someone you know can. But if the question you asked, Howard, was how do we identify and attract? I think the identify bit is process, and you can actually go about doing that. The attract bit is key. What are you offering that candidate that's different? And that consistency of customer contact you talked about there, Paul.
Yep.
What's your contact with your key candidates? If you identify the quality candidates, the NPCs in your database, how often are you talking to them? What are you giving them that's new in the market? Information, market intelligence that makes them see you as a trusted expert. So when you do have that opportunity, they give you exclusivity, or they come to you, or they take the gamble that the job you're talking about is right for them because you know them well. So I think not enough work is done on that attracting and that building trust with our quality candidates as well.
So there's not a lot to add to that, except a couple of things. You know, what candidate service do we offer? You know, do we offer the candidate service at all? You know, I've been talking to clients about, as soon as a candidate now registers with them, instantly engage them into a newsletter. So now at least you're emailing them either weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, so they're getting something from you. But we tend to use candidates as a throwaway product, where actually we should be thinking about how much we can use that candidate and what from there. And I think the other side is, if we want to make ourselves a little bit easy to get in contact with, and we all see this, you know, how hard is it sometimes to find contact details on a website? How many recruiters actually put a mobile number or an email address on LinkedIn? And yet we spend a fortune on those 2 products, okay, but we make it really difficult for people to actually contact us from those 2 products. You know, I'm scared of loads of clients just ringing me up, or a load of candidates ringing up. I'd love it if a load of clients ring me up and a load of candidates ring me up. It'd be absolutely brilliant. So make sure we get our capabilities in the right place. Can our candidates be capable of actually contacting us when they need us? Are we using them properly, i.e. not just putting them through a very small recruitment process where we fall in love with them and they fall in love with us, but as soon as they're wrong, we disengage them and throw them away? Why aren't we keeping engaging them with them, keep developing them, keep our focus on them? Because we know if a client comes and if we've got candidates that are available, back to days 50, okay, my comment was every week I had to my staff telling me which 10 candidates were available and they could place now, not in the future, now. So we always had a view of what was going on, and they were always keeping in contact with lots and lots of candidates. So in the future, they had people that they could place. And that goes back to Paul's comment about knowing what your clients need, not now, but in the future, and knowing what they can offer, but what can we offer our candidates? So let's move the dial a little bit. How do you increase your gross profit but lower your cost of sale without impacting the ability on your team to increase sales?
Do you guys understand that question?
My eyes just went to the top of my head. I'm thinking, okay.
But for me, Howard, you and I have talked about this as well, is changing the mindset from how many jobs have I got on to how many candidates do I have out at jobs. So if your consultants have to work a certain amount of hours to find 3 CVs for a job, why aren't they sending those same 3 CVs to multiple customers?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Reduce their overhead, their work. And then similarly, we talked about people are obsessed with the percentage margin they're charging. And I get it, you have to defend your value, but how much do you value exclusivity? You can be a busy idiot working loads of roles at 20%, but if you can get exclusivity at 18%, look at your profitability and productivity and make a sensible business decision about controlling your cost.
Yeah, I knew Martin was brought in for a reason. He's obviously he's got a brain. I let me try and also add to this. I think that this also comes down to using tech, increasingly cheaper tech these days, to help you to source candidates at a quicker rate, to connect with candidates through the CRM in a range of different ways that will help us to find time, back to Martin's point, and indeed Dave's point, to work with great candidates that we can place or roles that we can fill. What we've got to do is, and you're right, we've got to find the time to be doing those things, that the human touch, where the human touch makes a massive difference, and use technology, use other methods that are reasonably cheap to bring into the business to help us to engage with candidates and clients and so forth, so that we are using our time, as you said, intelligently and in a way that's going to benefit the business and produce the profits we're looking for.
I think I've always believed that the best agencies have the best jobs for each candidate. And if you've got a really good candidate, NPC, whatever you want to call them, and you've got one salesperson representing that one candidate for one job, the better agency will have a candidate and have 5 different jobs. They'll know the market, they'll give the candidate choice. That's how you increase your chance of success. You increase your chance of profit, because the cost of sale isn't anymore, because you've got the candidate. It's just sometimes there's hallelujahs on the sales floor when you find the right candidate for that job.
Yeah.
But there must be 5 other jobs that candidate can do. Have you got those jobs? If you haven't got those jobs, but you've got the A-list candidate, then you've got that opportunity to go. And if you're a Hollywood talent agent and you represent Tom Cruise, he gets pitched out, or he goes to pitch for 5 different films before he chooses one. And the agent's job is to get in front of 5 different producers and see which is the one that they're going to go for.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We can't all be Tom Cruise anymore. Sorry, guys. But from the point of view of making sure we've got our most placeable candidates, make sure we've got enough jobs for them.
Yeah.
So I just think that you think about increasing your gross profit. You've got 2 ways to do that. Okay. You either increase the number of clients that you've got billing, or you increase the percentage that you're charging to that client. But to increase the percentage and bill more clients, you have to have more product. So if you can then reduce the cost of candidate acquisition by developing a better candidate base, better technology to find those candidates at a quicker rate, etc., then keep them on your system, in contact, keeping that data nice and clean, then you can increase your gross profit quite easily. And what we're talking about is exactly what we're thinking about. It doesn't matter whether it's a temp worker or a contract worker or a perm worker. The more opportunities they have, the more they will come to you when they next need an opportunity. Now, you start to think about the perm market. I keep pulling this stat out, and I can't remember where I read it. 85% of every perm placement made by a recruitment agency, the candidate never goes back to that agency for another job. Wow. So that says that we just do not keep in contact and create a long-term relationship with our candidate base. And that is where all your gross profit is. And we constantly talk about clients that are billing. Well, actually, they only bill when the catalyst of the candidate comes into play. So let's break the catalyst first, create the catalyst, and that creates more billings. And if you've got constant product to sell to your clients, they'll come to you more often. You can then charge more for that product.
Yeah.
So how can recruitment leaders install a habit of proactive talent pooling to stay ahead of demand?
I think I sort of touched on this earlier. I do think it's about recognizing that keeping close to candidates is an essential element of what you do on a daily, weekly basis. But I also think that it's about getting our people to understand the benefits. I think the most effective organizations have people working in the organization that understand why they're doing certain things. The what's in it for me syndrome. There's no point in just telling people to do things. If you tell people to do things and they don't understand why they're doing them, but they're doing them because they're told to do things, you'll get disgruntled people, and presumably over a period of time, quite a high staff turnover. I think this comes down to the constant messaging, the constant conversations about what we stand for as an organization. I think this comes down to the benefits for the individuals in the business, how they can increase their earnings, how they can develop their careers, and so forth. So I think when we're looking at instilling habits, if we talk about that broadly, it isn't about telling people, it's about getting them to share the vision of the organization. This also comes down, in my mind, to something very important, because when I started in the industry, we were taught to place, and this is back to Dave's point, our job was to place great people in great jobs, and it was the expression we used to use. We were very candidate driven. It was about getting a great candidate and doing something with that great candidate, because we knew within 1 or 2 working days they were off the market. They had interviews and you'd lost them. And I've never lost that drive. Repeatedly, I see in this day and age that we work jobs. We get jobs in, we try and work the jobs, and we pay little heed to the candidates themselves. They disappear into the black hole, otherwise known as the CRM, never to hear from us again. So I think it's about getting people to understand the benefits of making certain that they're proactively talking to people who have shown an interest in us helping them find another job. And whether we've been able to do that in the past, or whether we're trying to help them at the moment, or we've failed to help them, but we can bring them back into the fold and try again. I think this is an essential ingredient. If you are, and I think Martin made the point, what's the difference between a candidate and a client? None. They're the same human beings. We just catch them at different points in their careers. So if you respect your clients, you should have equal respect for the people that come in and ask you to assist them. And to my mind, that's a massive priority on a daily basis.
Yeah, I did an exercise about a year ago for a client when we were looking at websites, and we looked at 50 websites, and of the 50 websites, I can't remember the exact number, 37 had client references, and only 5 had candidate references. And I think one thing that you can do that becomes a habit that you could show that you care about your candidates is get your candidates to tell the world via your website, via your newsletters, via blogs, via LinkedIn, what the experience was like working through your agency, or that your agent or your consultant. Get them to talk about that experience, because in a market where candidates are difficult to come by, the experience they have of working with us matters more than ever. So then we should be talking about that as much as we should be talking about clients.
When I think of the best consultants that I've worked with over the years, they used to have WhatsApp groups of their best talent, regardless of whether they were working for them or not. And they would curate that talent pool. They'd get together at Christmas, put the car behind the bar and buy a few drinks. Those contractors or perm people would bring their friends along who maybe didn't even have LinkedIn profiles, and they'd build a network that way. And when I talk to people today about why aren't they doing it, it comes down to confidence. They don't understand what their role is. In the tech world, they're thinking, well, these people know their market so well. What am I going to add to it? And it reminds me of an anecdote. I was watching Matt Dawson, the rugby player, at an event talking about leadership. And someone asked him the question, what did Clive Woodward teach you best about rugby? And he just laughed and said, Clive Woodward couldn't teach me anything about rugby, but that wasn't his job. His job was to be the architect of an environment that allowed me to be the best I could be. So when we talk to consultants now, it's about saying, You haven't got to punch your weight talking about the technology or the sector. You just need to create an environment and curate that environment so that everyone in it gets the most from it that they're looking for. And once you explain that role that they're going to play, the confidence comes back because they can do that. I understand the recruitment market. I understand where the jobs are. I can play that role as opposed to being a sector specialist that these people are. So I think that social networking and doing it for people that aren't just working for you is really key.
Yeah.
I think we tend to dismiss talent pooling far too quickly, and we don't get the discipline for talent pooling and how that works. And I remember a long time ago training pre-season for rugby, and one of his friends was second or third in the country at decathlon, and he was at Leeds University at the time, and he taught us plyometrics for the first time. And we were all sat there going, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And he says, it's not going to improve your ability to run faster, quicker, etc. today, but if we do it for 6 months, look where you'll get. In 6 months' time, we were quicker, faster, stronger than anything before. So you start to think about anything that you've talked about there about putting a talent pooling process into play. You've got to consistently do it, and you've got to do it well, and that will pay dividend at the end. Think about that question: what do clients want? And at the moment, clients aren't wanting service. They don't want that until you start to prove that you can do that. All they'll say to you at the moment, what we want is a quality candidate. And there's a reason why. From lockdown to today, there are more than 800,000 candidates that have dropped out of the recruitment market or the employable market. That's the biggest number of candidates dropping out of a market ever. That's not going to increase because of lack of the decrease in population that's happening. So we've got to start to think, if we're not pooling our talent now, then we're going to start to actually run out of talent, and therefore our cost of acquisition becomes higher, our speed of service becomes slower, our clients will never take us on as exclusive or sell better services to us because we can't provide the talent. So I think the habit of talent pooling now becomes more important than ever before. So I'm going to finish there, but I'm going to ask one very simple question, and I want to sort of very quick answer, Paul. Okay, the quick answer is this, okay? What role does consistency in client and candidate engagement play in securing ongoing revenue?
One word: total.
Well, consistency becomes a behavior, and if you get the behavior right, you will increase your growth, you'll scale, you will have a more profitable business.
And I'll say culture. If you're looking to bring new people into your business, if they can see consistent application, they'll adopt it as well.
And that then just leaves the final word: habit. You took all of those three things together, that creates the habit. The habit creates the routine creates the reward. And if you start to think, what's the cue? That's what Martin's talking about. What's the routine? That's what Dave's talking about. What's the reward? That's what we're all talking about. That's the revenue generated. So it's about creating the right habits.
Yep.
So ladies and gents, thank you much for that. Dave, Paul, Martin, thanks very much for your input.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
It is a fact that Martin is adding a touch of class. I'm not sure how we can spell that, though, but we can work on it in some way. Ladies and gentlemen, that leaves it. See you all next week. Next week, we're going to talk about how to grow revenue and profitability in your business. So again, an interesting topic as we're coming out of a hard year for 2025. So thanks again. See you all next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Look, everybody.
Take good care. Bye now.